cousins. At Christmas time, we would spend all day going from one house to another. Those are the good memories. My beloved Nana, Dad's mom, was very instrumental in my life as a small child. She took me to church with her. These are the cherished memories. I loved her so much, and she loved me. She passed away in 1963 when I was 8 years old. I didn't understand much, but I wasn't allowed to cry. Mom said it would upset Dad, so I had to grieve my beloved Nana alone. I learned at an early age to hide my emotion. In my early childhood years, I struggled in school. It was hard for me to focus and pay attention. I was made fun of and called names like Fatty Patty, which I would reply, "Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me." But for some reason, that was a far cry from the truth. Those names did hurt. This was the beginning of my low self-esteem. When I was in 4th grade, we moved to our new home, new school, and new friends in Pequannock, New Jersey. I still struggled in school. My Grammy, my mom's mom, made my dresses. They were plain cotton with zigzag piping. I felt different than the other kids. My clothes were homemade. I was made fun of a lot, and all through middle school, I struggled. Then in high school, there's where I met my first love. I was playing hooky more than I was going to school. My home life was out of control. Mom had a girl living with us. Her name was Joey, and she was a groupie. Her persuasion on us was so great, she even turned my younger brother on to smoking pot at age 10. Because of her influences on me, I was suspended from high school for dressing risque. When the principal threatened to call my mom, I begged him not to, but he did anyway. And when she showed up with Joey, dressed in hot pants, remember that was in the 70s, he then understood why. He asked him not to, shortly after I dropped out of school. My father drank as far back as I can remember. We even had a real bar in our basement with a sign that lit up in the window. It said that we were open. As I was a kid, I thought it was actually cool to have a bar in the basement. But after school, kids would come to our house and we'd mix drinks and act like we were adults. One of my first sexual experiences was in that basement. My father was an Irish carpenter and worked a lot. Mom worked sometimes in real estate. Dad would usually arrive home drunk and at all hours. I remember my mom waiting by the window for him. I remember my mom always waiting by that window for him to come home with dinner ready on the stove. I had inherited that trait, and it took years for me to break. If my brothers and I were bad, she would sick him on us. He would come to our rooms and beat us with a belt or a cat o' nine tails until his hands got tired. I tried to pad myself with pillows as I got older, but if he found them, it would just get worse. My brothers would get beat too. I would cover my ears from their screams. He would hit Mom too. I remember we'd wake up to her black eyes and swollen lips. She would tell us she fell down the stairs, but we didn't believe her. Mom would take us kids to Catholic church, the only religion I knew. She would drop us off and then come back and pick us up. As we got older, my brothers and I would sneak off to the corner store for candy after we were dropped off, and then be back in time for her to get us. My brother and I usually did the communion and confirmation as a Catholic. The nuns, however, did have somewhat an influence on me. I even wanted to become a nun. One day I imagined that I wanted to be a nun. I even took a tour of the convent. As a kid, I'd move over in my bed and make room for Jesus to sleep. I really don't know when that slipped away, but it did. I dropped out of high school in my junior year at age 16, and I got married to get away from the insanity at my house. The man I married was David. He was 25 years old, and my father had to sign papers in those days for me to get married, and my mother agreed to it as well. That was in 1971. We lived in Vernon, New Jersey. I lived an upper-class lifestyle and never wanted for any material thing. He owned a leather factory in New York City, and I was a stay-at-home housewife. I was isolated and alone, way up in the country in the woods, while he was gone for 12 to 13 hours a day. Before I turned 18, in September of 1973, my first daughter, Sally, was born. I was a mom, a wife, cooking and cleaning and caring for my baby up until June of 1974, when I was driving a 1973 Plymouth Scamp and had a horrible accident. I went over a 100-foot cliff and went through the windshield. I was in intensive care for 3.5 weeks. My face was messed up, my nose was off, my eye was out. They had to put a metal plate in my arm. I had a tracheotomy in my throat, and I had to point to letters on a blackboard. I spent months in the hospital. I looked like a monster, and I was scared. Sally wouldn't recognize me. That's what I thought, but she did. My baby girl was only 9 months old at the time of the accident. I truly believed that God reached down his hand that day to save me. I went through years of surgeries. My life was never the same. My husband's rejection of me and fighting only escalated during that time. My husband found other women to show his affections to, but I didn't know this until decades later. Our marriage was a battle royale, very dysfunctional. The last fight, he choked me with a telephone cord. I packed and left with my daughter Sally, and I moved to South Florida. So after almost 10 years, we were divorced. That was in 1981, and I was a lost soul. I was 25 years old and knew nothing of the real world. He left me penniless, and he was ruthless. I remember my apartment only having a bed and one chair. I continued to survive. It was hard after 10 years of marriage, and no skills to speak of. He immediately remarried, and I was devastated. I found myself in Florida, looking for what I thought was love in all the wrong places. I was alone and immature in many ways from living a sheltered lifestyle. My first encounter was with a hardcore alcoholic who took me to bars and clubs. I lived in a fast lane going nowhere. I drank and I drugged. I was running from God. The pain was so great. I had blackouts. I woke up not knowing where I was. I used and abused, and it's amazing I did not end up dead. He pulled me by my hair across the floor on more than one occasion, and I woke up to an apartment full of smoke from a random stranger while sleeping on our sofa when it caught on fire. This was a level of insanity I had never seen. The police involved. He went to jail numerous times, only for me to take him back again, and to have more of the same. I was out of control. All of this, and I had my little girl, Sally. I was trying to raise her in the midst of this chaos, feeling alone and afraid. I even went to work as a cook at Groveland Academy in northern Florida. I found myself surrounded by lots of Christians. I started to get my act together. One of my husband's regular visitations with our daughter, Sally, he took her and never returned again. He kidnapped her, and then took me to court and sued for custody, and he won. His family had a lot of money, and I couldn't fight that. This was the worst pain in my life up to that time, losing my little girl. There are no words to describe that pain. I felt the depth of despair, but I was not done with my drinking. I moved to Fort Lauderdale, then back to New Jersey, and then to Connecticut. I tried control drinking. It worked a little. I worked as a nurse's assistant and would only drink on weekends. My rebellion was my driving force. No one was ever going to tell me what to do again. My mouth and attitude were that I would slice you up with my tongue and spit you out with my mouth. My drinking lasted from 1981 to 1987. At that time, I was working as a waitress in Spotswood Diner in New Jersey. I was known as the AA waitress because I waited on all the AA folks coming in after their meetings. It was here I met a man named Tony while waitressing. One night, he came in and saw that I was black and blue from head to toe from rolling my car over after being drunk, of course. No DUI, The cop called my brother to come and get me. Tony invited me to AA meetings. Only now can I see that God's hand of protection was over me. My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. The next day and every day for 3 months, I went to meetings. Finally, one day, I actually raised my hand and said, "Hi, I'm Patty, and I'm an alcoholic, and I was powerless over alcohol, and my life was unmanageable." I started going back to church, too. I was really serious and dove into recovery and into church. This time it was Spotswood Church of God in New Jersey. In recovery, they told me no relationships for the first year. So I didn't have a relationship. I just got pregnant. Still rebellious. Yep, sad. Still rebellious, but I kept on attending AA. One day, my baby's daddy just disappeared. I was 6 months pregnant at the time, and he's never been seen until 20 years later. And at the same time, my dad passed away. I was devastated, but I was sober. I returned to Florida in 1988, single and pregnant. I wanted to be near Sally, and 1 month later, Laura was born. That was October 23rd, 1988, and I was 1 year sober. Amen. Now, here I am, back in Florida, with baby Laura and living near Sally, going to AA meetings. Laura has never seen me drunk or drugged, but regrettably, Sally saw a lot. I regret it to this day. This mends to Sally is an ongoing process. Laura grew up around the rooms of AA, which in turn brought me back to my faith. I then went to church a lot, but only to AA yearly to pick up my medallion. My first husband was Italian. He had strong beliefs, loyalty to the death. Today, my loyalty is to God. I have also learned that I am only as sick as my secrets. Today, I have freedom in Christ to share my experience, strength, and hope with others, and not just for you, but for me. In 1998, clean and sober, I married my present husband, Tom, a godly man and a far cry from any other relationships. He had 3 children, Thomas, John, and Heather, and Laura was 10 at the time. Today, I have 5 children, all adults, 5 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandbabies. I was able to be there for my mom in hospice when she passed, and I had the privilege of taking care of my mother-in-law during her cancer and her last days. It's been a long road. After years of being sober and active in Bible studies, I was still having a lot of relationship issues, and especially having problems with my youngest daughter, Laura. I was actively working in Christian ministries, but had anger issues of my own. Yeah, I wonder why. I came to Calvary for help, and they directed me to the 12-step class. It was the very last day to get in, and I was late. But I went, and I needed help from my daughter. Little did I know it was for me that needed the help. I learned that I was a codependent, and that I needed to change. I didn't even know what a codependent was at the time. I was clueless. I didn't even have an idea in how it would change my life. It took me a long time to open up and share my hurts, habits, and hang-ups, but I completed the year-long step study. I worked the steps and began to see my part. The step study helped me to heal the anger, and I was so used to pushing under the rug. I learned that I didn't have to be the victim. I could have victory. With God, all things are possible. Philippians 1:6 says, "Being confident of this, that he that began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ." Today I am a new creation. Today I am set free. Romans 8:1 says, "Therefore there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." It was here at Celebrate Recovery that I learned how to say no. I learned how to not feel guilty and condemnation. I learned that I do not have to control the world. God doesn't need my help. It gave me back my purposes that I was asking God for all along. I started coming to Celebrate Recovery and serving and giving back, helping others with the same things I struggled with. I am truly amazed at the depth of my despair and pain, God was not through with me. All I had to do was be willing. I have made